Joining us now is Lincoln Mitchell. He's a political analyst and writer and an adjunct associate professor of political science at Columbia University. So Lincoln, first, what do you make of Afghanistan's ambassador to the UN pulling out or being pulled out of debate, who was still part of the previous government, and then we saw a withdrawal from Myanmar as well?
Well, I think being withdrawn is the better way to say it, rather than withdraw. And it's a tough call. I mean, he no longer represents the government of Afghanistan, and the world knows that. So even though the world, a lot of people don't like the new government, certainly the United States doesn't, certainly most of our allies don't. The Taliban can be pretty nasty people, but to have a speech given by somebody who doesn't represent the government, I don't really understand the point of that in this setting. There is a point to that, but not in a setting of heads of state. So that's Afghanistan. Myanmar is a little different, but it's a similar dynamic. The new government that's come to power in the coup is, they haven't put structures in place to have a new person. The spokesperson doesn't want to represent a government that he doesn't like. So I think this is kind of natural. Neither of these two stories are something that the world is going to be concerned about a week from now, right? We're just debriefing the final few hours of the General Assembly, but this is not something that people are going to be talking about a week from now. They'll be talking about Afghanistan, of course, and Myanmar, of course, but not this.
Well, this year's UNGA saw a lot of in-person, high-profile appearances. We've heard some criticism about, appearing in person, not doing something virtual like last year. But it also provided a bit of normalcy amid the pandemic. What would you say were the biggest takeaways from this past week, which also saw speeches from the Chinese and U.S. presidents?
A couple of big takeaways from me. One is that climate change has now moved firmly to front and center of everything the UN does. But the UN and the constituent members of the UN still don't know really what to do with it. So you can make a few statements here, a few pledges here, but I didn't see coming out of this a cohesive global UN major powers plan to combat climate change. So the good news is, as the clock keeps ticking down, people are beginning to focus. The bad news is we don't really have an answer. The other big takeaway, or a strategy, the other big takeaway for me is that President Biden gave a speech that, if you kind of close your eyes, could have been given by pretty much any American president other than Donald Trump in the last quarter century. Maybe not quite George W. Bush, but close. And certainly George H.W. Bush, certainly Bill Clinton or Barack Obama or somewhere like that. So it was back to kind of normalcy on the American side. And the flip side of that is that there was this short-lived competition to see who could claim the mantle of the global right-wing populist movement, of which Donald Trump had been the leader, and the Brazilian president Jair Bolsonaro won that contest very easily. Worth noting that for Bolsonaro, New York City has a mandate here. You cannot go to a restaurant and eat inside unless you're vaccinated, which is a very good policy for those of us who live in New York. So Bolsonaro and his team, and you saw a couple of photos of this, were stuck eating pizza outside on the street in New York City because they couldn't go into the pizza place.
So they, paid attention to the rules of the city and not the United Nations. I want to quickly circle back.
The restaurant owners paid attention to the rules of the city.
Well, I want to get your take again on climate change. You mentioned that not much progress you think was made, but here we are just weeks away from COP26. So what happens then if you're saying that countries are going in without a real plan, but we have this big summit in Glasgow coming up?
Well, any progress is good progress, but the problem is that an incremental approach, it's too late. An incremental approach is not going to be enough, and we all know this. And many of us throw our hands up. I'm not a climate expert. I don't know the science as well, but I know that we have to kind of rethink everything. And it's great not to build any more coal plants overseas, and it's great for the U.S. to increase its emissions, make its emission standards stronger. But that is just a day late and a dollar short right now. So what comes out of the next conference? I don't know. But if it's not big, it just continues to be kind of slight rearranging of the deck chairs on the Titanic, and that is not a strategy.
We will leave it there. Lincoln Mitchell, always great to see you. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.